Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get singles for all your Force of Will and other trading card games, as well as these amazing patrons.
Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video.
Hey there, Rulers, DMO73 here, bringing you a feature match for the week between myself on red, black, white, Melgis. It's just like the tiniest little bit of white, and I am on the left, and I am playing against Aaron, who is playing a red, blue, white Faria control style list. Utilizing some Knights of the Round Table stuff, and you're going to see like Lamorak for life gain. And then obviously it's heavier based in blue-white, as opposed to the Lenneth list, which was heavier based on red-white. So I am going to be on the play because I won the die roll. The Melgis list is using, it's not like trying to just burst out the damage as fast as possible. It definitely has that capability, but it's just kind of an incidental thing. It's mainly trying to play this mid-range game and then reanimate a bunch of stuff using like March to the Dead, so that it's just kind of this overwhelming tide of pressure that your opponent can't keep up with. And then you have Reach for the end game in forms of like Awakening of the Flame King and stuff like that. So yeah, let's go ahead and see how it goes. First turn, Adorakti's Memoria into red Percival. So get to look at the top 5 and grab a Regalia or a Fire Resonator. We're going to go ahead and grab that Guinevere just to be able to keep the card draw going. Again, this is not a deck that's just trying to run out of cards super fast and hope that you kill your opponent. It's going for that middle of the, mid-game kind of push. So Guinevere is a super important card for that because it just keeps your hand full, especially as your Resonators start to get killed. Aaron meet again on his turn with a white Percival, seeing a 2 Excalibur and a Caduceus, ultimately choosing to grab the Excalibur, and then passing the turn there. Heat Ray coming down on the Melgis side. We're going to go ahead and see Leviathan come down. We're going to choose the modes to pick a stranger and get a 7/1. So we're going to get a stranger here at random. I personally choose to roll dice whenever possible, just to take any kind of human influence out of the situation. And then we'll generate our 7/1. Swinging in for 2 with the Percival here, decides to go ahead and say I'll take that damage. Swinging in for 7. We'll respond to the block of Percival by banishing Percival to deal 2 damage to it. Therefore the 7 damage gets through and we take Aaron down to 31. At that point in time we can just pass the turn and we say go ahead. Seeing a Light Vapors on Aaron's side. Does choose to go ahead and play the Regalia, picking modes to draw a stranger and draw a card. Can choose to use that Energize. Going to go ahead and try to use it to use the Seal of Lenneth to remove my Leviathan from the game, at least for right now. I say that's fine. I'm not entirely sure if I agree with that play, mainly because it does spend the 1 will. I can see him not wanting, with a clear board, not wanting to let me be at 5 will, I guess can make sense. However, I think there's justification to leaving that 1 will open so that he could potentially awaken a Sacred Wave Blade or something like that. Otherwise, he's just can like normally use 1. Going to my turn, we're just going to go ahead and play 2 Guineveres and say, cool, let's go ahead and set up this draw engine to just sculpt our hand as much as we want. Also works really well to be able to discard those cards. End of turn, choose to flash in the Twin Swords of Water's Mercy. Say, put one of those Gwins at least back on top of your deck. Let's time walk you a little bit. It's the beauty of Excalibur being able to play these strangers. Water strangers are a lot of quick casts, so you have that value there. So even if you're not trying to awaken, if you have the right stranger in hand, you can still kind of retain that pressure. And time walking is not bad. So going to go ahead and swing in for 6 there with Twin Swords and then play a Lamorak. So this is going to protect his Regalia, and then also Lamorak now gains +2/+2 and Drain because the Regalia is on the board. I'm going to go ahead and at the end of his turn use Guinevere here. Gets me past the Guinevere that he put on top of his deck, so at least I'm drawing into a new card. Ultimately, you'd want to have those Guineveres on board as long as possible, so that they generate the most value, but getting past the Time Walk from Twin Swords was important enough to kind of risk losing the Resonator. Down comes the Leviathan on my side here. Gonna get that 7/1 token, choosing to get a Stranger as well. paying another 2 for a Shakti. So while Shakti's on the board, she's treated as a J ruler, so she has swiftness. And then we get access to any time we're going to try to clone, or anytime we try to cast a Blade Art while Shakti's on board, Shakti will clone it, and I can move it to a different target. So ultimately, I'm trying to use opening the red eyes here to put the +7/+7 on the token, and then the 7/1/1 counters onto the Shakti. He's going to choose to awaken Sacred Waveblade in response to that, so he at least gets the Stranger off of it. However, he is, it doesn't stop the cloning effect. So the token at least gets to kill the Lamorak. It gets first strike thanks to cloning the red eyes, opening the red eyes. So he doesn't get the life gain off of it, and then at the end of that turn, we're going to pass. So this is a pretty good position for Eric to be in. I mean, I'm tapped out completely. My board is clear. He gets a free swing here and can just kind of call Stone Pass, which is what his deck kind of wants to be doing. It wants to be the defender. Just kind of responding and making me tap out every single time. That's the usual matchup between a control and a aggro deck. The control player wants to stabilize and then just be able to constantly punish. Not in terribly bad shape, just simply because the Melgis deck has so much value, and with Leviathan, like, we're going up to 7 will here, which is a lot to be able to play around with even as the aggro deck. Playing Red Wizard here off of the 1 stone so that we can try to burn the board for 6. That is a red Percival on Aaron's side of the board, so he's going to go ahead and hit me for 2 by banishing it, and then we get to clear off the Twin Swords. Down comes that Guinevere that we saw earlier. Calling that stone, getting us our 5th stone. At that point in time, I think we just passed the turn. Sacred Waveblade to hit the Guinevere, get him another Stranger here. Both decks making a very good use of their awakening spells to be able to get access to lots of Strangers in hand. One of the advantages that Aaron has over the Melgis deck is Melgis just doesn't really play much Addition hate or mainboarded Regalia hate. I think this list is playing 2 Regalia Break in the main just because Shakti, so he can kind of clone it, make use of it in good ways for like matchups that just happen to play double Regalia. But for the most part, Excalibur or something like that is only going to probably clear the field when Aaron wants it to, as opposed to Aaron being able to remove Leviathan kind of when he wants with things like Seal of Lenneth or stuff like that. Race and Revive as well can also remove a Regalia. So after playing the red Percival, just choosing to pass the turn. Nothing in upkeep for Melgis. There's really nothing of value there worth doing. See, we do have that Command of Life and Death engraved. Ultimately, not a ton of stuff engraved to be able to target. But first, we're going to go ahead and just try to see if Red Wizard can get there for a swing for 6. Clears the red Percival off the board. Then we're going to March of the Dead Awakened. Gets us a Shakti and a red Percival. Ray thought about using the red Percival opposed to the Guinevere, as the red Percival will immediately generate us value and kind of replace the March of the Dead, as opposed to Guinevere potentially having to sit around for a turn. And we want to be... I start to grab Awakening, and that's not at all what red Percival does. So I don't know why I thought to grab it. I thought I was just maybe thinking Fire Card, but that's Pang Tong. So Aaron catches me here, and he's like, wait a minute, you can't grab that. And I'm like, oh, right. So I'll grab Shakti, who is a 2-drop Fire Resonator, so I can at least get that pressure continued going. Playing the second Shakti here. Swinging in for 6. This means that at this point, all my Blade Arts are cloned twice, so an opening the Red Eyes is particularly devastating. Just 2 will, and I can potentially generate 21 counters. We're going to go ahead and see a Awakening of the Sacred Queen. He's going to use it to the mode to grab a Light Regalia and bring it to the field using Caduceus, picking 1 mode to try to destroy the Shakti, in which case we're going to go ahead and respond with that opening the Red Eyes so we can clone it twice. we're going to try to give the counters. We're going to try to use it 2 on the one that's currently being targeted and then 1 on the one that's not. The reason why is because she gains Eternal until end of turn, and so that Caduceus trigger from Excalibur or from Faria isn't going to kill it. He is going to respond to that though and then remove her from the game. So unfortunately, and then he's just going to Twin Swords of Water Mercy to put it back on top of my deck. So Aaron doing a really, really good job there of mitigating the value that I was trying to get off of that double Shakti, making me waste a lot of cards, and then very cheaply kind of countering them, which is exactly what his deck wants to be doing. And at this point in time, he's sitting at a grand total of 10 will between his Regalia. The only thing to note is that Caduceus can only play for Mage Arts, and Excalibur can only play for Sword Arts. So based on what's in his hand, it can get a little awkward. Swinging in for 6 with that Twin Swords, taking me down to 2,000. Ishtar coming down here, gets to revive anything he wants. Gonna bring back the Lamorak. He can produce double blue with Excalibur and then double white with Caduceus to make that happen because of their abilities. We're going to go ahead and do Judgment with Melgis here for 3. It is going to cost us. Ultimately, the reason for this is it's a lot of pressure early on. Melgis gets to put potentially 2... on the turn he answers, Melgis gets to potentially put 2 Strangers into play because he gets 1 off the flip and then 1 off of his God Art. So based on what you hit, it can be potentially pretty devastating. I think what we hit here is the guy who gives all of my Resonators Swiftness. Choosing to play that Shakti. Red Wizard swinging in for 6. Goes down to 25. Red Percival for 2. So that's fine, down to 23. Swinging in with Swiftness for, I think he swings in for 1,000. Maybe not, though. I can't remember exactly his stats. Might be 800. 700. Choosing to take that damage. Swinging in with Shakti for the 600. I can go from there. Then we're going to go ahead and respond to the block by using Bloody Break, which will get cloned with Shakti to try to kill both his Lamorak and his Ishtar and get me 2 Strangers because it's awakened. So when Shakti clones something that's awakened, the clone also is awakened. So burning out the ability to potentially God's Art here, but generating 2 cards and also hitting him for at least 6 damage here, taking him down to 10, which puts him in lethal range from a Melgis. Not that I expect Melgis to be able to connect here. And then we attempt to swing in, knowing that it's probably going to get stopped, but if it doesn't, then this is just lethal. Oh, and he says, oh, sorry. Before we move back into combat, Aaron's going to use that Awakening of the Sacred Queen to rest Melgis, so he can't possibly take that damage, and then pitch an Ishtar from hand to reanimate the Lamorak. So a really good spot for me to be in, kind of a lot of burst damage very, very quickly, while also establishing this kind of wide board. The problem being that I'm completely tapped out against a deck that has 11 will at this point and still has Yes to Judgment with their Faria. Faria also generates a free Stranger on enter, so that could hit into an Ishtar. It only has 1 left at this point, but it could also hit a Siegfried, which would be able to kill something. Twin Swords of Water Mush, he's going to go ahead and swing into the Melgis. And then so is the Lamorak. So we'll gain some life, kill the Melgis, and I'm out of my God Art for the game, which I think is probably fine. Ultimately, he wasted a lot of resources. He lost 2 bodies. to be able to make that play, and still has to deal with everything else that I'm threatening on board, especially since my 2-drop Stranger lets all of my guys that I play have swiftness. It's just a lot of pressure very, very quickly that Aaron is going to have to think about closely with how much potential instant speed stuff he might have. Playing a Holy Nova here, it is unawakened. And then playing an Excalibur to cycle the other Excalibur, gets him a Stranger and lets him draw a card. And then at that point in time, choosing to do Judgment for free, thanks to the Excalibur trigger. Gets a free Stranger into play. Hitting a Undine. Can bounce stuff back to hand. Ultimately, at this point, there's not really much he would want to do that to. Bouncing a Regalia back to hand just means that I get to replay it and do the triggers. Bouncing his Seal of Lenneth would be bad because it would bring in my other Leviathan and get me the triggers. And he doesn't really want to bounce his own Excalibur or Caduceus either. The question for Aaron becomes how much he wants to leave open will on my turn, or for my turn, or just try to establish kind of a pressure point right now. Ultimately, probably a good spot here to jam the Arthur. The Arthur's going to get him any other knight that he wants. Knight of the Round Table. He can grab a Lamorak, he could grab a Gawain, he could grab a Percival. Oddly enough, I think there's justification here for potentially grabbing the white Percival to be able to protect Faria. The problem is Bloody Break just says destroy, and Percival only protects from damage. Ultimately choosing just to grab the Lamorak here. With Knight of the Round Table, I think, or King Arthur, I think on board Lamorak makes sense because Lamorak has Eternal, so he can just block and gain life and won't die. So there's just a lot of potential value to be gained out of that play. March of the Dead coming down here. It's going to re-grab my Stranger to give all of my guys swiftness. Using Leviathan to play an Astema. Swinging in for 10. It's got 10 in the air with lifelink. Or sorry, with Drain. So the Undine will die and I'll get the gain back up to 3 grand. Playing another 3 for a second Astema. Swinging that in successfully. That takes him down to 600 and me back up to 4k. This is also great because at the beginning of the next turn, Aaron is going to have to sacrifice, before even getting to draw, Lamorak and the Arthur. So that point, ultimately choosing to not use the remaining 2 will. On going to Aaron's turn, we're going to go ahead and see that trigger, which makes him sacrifice the Arthur and the Lamorak, and then we're back down to just Faria. Now, Faria still has her God Art, which gives her plus 400 and Drain. Also important to note right now that with Excalibur and Caduceus, she's already a 14-14 with Drain. So if he God Arts here, it should become an 18 with double Drain. So 3,600 life off of a single swing of her. Choosing to use Holy Nova here, Awakened, so he gets a free Stranger off of it. In response, we're going to go ahead and force, I don't remember exactly what we did there. We see a Siegfried, which doesn't get to do anything. I think we said force it to be able to block, force it to attack this turn, instead of being able to call stone. I mean, ultimately he can choose to call stone anyway, but singing in for that 14 takes him back to 2,000. It takes me down to 26. At that point, passing the turn here. So he only has 2 will. She is tapped. We get red Percival. Do see that Regalia break, a Shakti, and a Leviathan. Once again, remembering that Red Percival can only grab me Regalia and Red Resonators. Read your words. We're going to go ahead and grab the Levitz in here. Float the two Will. I think we floated as double fire. Oh no, we're just going to actually just play a Regulus. And then go ahead and play Lancelot as well. Unfortunately, Caduceus doesn't provide the right amount of will to be able to do the God Art of Faria, so he's kind of locked out at this point. And then in playing a Lave to get another Stranger, I think we burn him for 5 actually, and generate a Stranger, a 7/1. That's just too many bodies on board for a single Siegfried to be able to stop, and so at that point in time, I think Aaron recognizes that he just loses the game here because he can't even block the Regulus because the rest of the damage is enough to push through, and Regulus will also just deal damage to him upon being blocked. So Aaron scoops it up, and we go into the next game.
As we go into the next game, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the bell down below so you're notified when all of our videos goes live, and consider supporting the channel by being a member here on YouTube or by checking it out on Patreon for all the cool exclusive perks that come with supporting us. Thank you guys so much. Let's go to the next game.
So Aaron choosing to go first here, putting Melgis on the draw. Adaractia's Memoria off the top, and then eventually no turn 1 play. Adaractia's Memoria for us as well. So we play the Look of Corruption, which we're going to go ahead and steal that Excalibur. One of the things in these Regalia matchups, Regalia deck mirrors, is if you can have your Regalia on board first, every single turn that your opponent doesn't have a Regalia immediately just generates you a ton of value. So right there you saw Aaron was going first, didn't have a turn 1 play, no turn 1 quick cast, nothing like that. We used Look of Corruption to be able to steal his Regalia, so now his only turn 2 play is an undefended Lamorak, and then we can go into a Regalia on our turn, which gets us a Stranger and that 7/1. Just a lot of value, and we also kind of ramps too, so now we can start applying that pressure. If he wants to block with that Lamorak, ultimately choosing to take the 7 damage here, which I think was an interesting decision. We can go ahead and potentially risk just losing the Guinevere now just to make use of the... Gonna go ahead and play Red Wizard just to clear Lamorak off the board, and then use Guinevere to sack away the token to draw 2 and discard 1. While also just having a nice little blocker for Guinevere. Not that his deck has anything that really has swiftness. Ultimately, though, like I said, we're tapped out, sure, but he's going to 3 will. We have Regalia on board. We're going to be at 5 will on our turn, and unfortunately, no turn 3 play from Aaron either, which is just really unfortunate. Swinging in, we're going to see that Awakening of the Sacred Queen come down from... This is probably why we didn't see a turn 3 play, so they could get Excalibur to field. This will let him destroy a rested Resonator and then get a Stranger. We're going to go ahead and sacrifice that to Guinevere. It's just showing the utility of Guinevere in terms of like making your opponent's removal at least a little less effective, because you're just turning it into draw and discard rather than hard losing the card. Red Percival coming down here. Gonna go ahead and grab the Shakti. Gonna go ahead and Regalia break his Excalibur here at the end of his turn, at the end of my turn. He's going to float the will. The main reason is we don't want him to have any Regalia will during his turn. Again, we want him to have to pay to commit when we're feeling ahead, especially since we're going to his turn with 3 will. So this is definitely that kind of mid-range feel that the Melgis deck kind of likes to be in. It's kind of applying pressure, being a tempo deck, making sure to keep his opponent off pace a little bit. See a Lamorak here that's unprotected. He only has 2 will, so we're not going to see an Awakening of the Sacred Queen come down again. At the end of the turn, we're going to go ahead and do Awakening of the Flame King that we had in hand, which is great. We'll burn the board for 4, and then play the Shakti. And I actually think we might have done it on my turn before the draw, because we have Swiftness anyway, just to put 4 damage onto the Lamorak. So this way we can swing in. We're swinging in for 6. Ultimately, if the smart play here would have been to do it during my turn, so that's the 4 damages there, swinging with the Percival first. So then the Lamorak has 4 damage on it, and the Percival could potentially be banished to do the last 2, so that Shakti can push through. Ultimately, though, Aaron choosing to just let the Shakti damage go through for 6, and now we're going to play the Percival, now that we have second Guinevere. Lamorak's going to go ahead and come down. We're going to see the Awakened Bloody Break here, both targeting the Lamorak, because we want to get the double strangers off of it. Getting the 2 additional damage here for Percival. And then passing the turn. End of the turn, we're going to see a Raise and Revive come down here. I think he's choosing the mode to search for a Light Regalia. So we can search him for a another Excalibur here. But as you can see, just like the amount of value that is in these Regalia mirrors, that's benefited just by having a Regalia while your opponent doesn't. You just get to be so far ahead, to the point where it feels very difficult to kind of catch up, which is one of the reasons why I think Melgis should at least be sideboarding Look of Corruptions for these kind of matchups, because if that Melgis deck can generate any kind of window of opportunity in the Regalia mirrors in the early game, you can just kind of snake it and steal it away, especially with any kind of late game reach. Like you have like Shakti cloning Awakening of the Sacred, Awakening of the Flame King for 1600 damage or stuff like that. Anyway, that you can just kind of continually be applying a pressure while your opponent is just trying to catch up. That can come from stealing those early Regalia is really important. Holy Nova, hard cast, so we're not going to get any strangers off of it, but it is going to leave Aaron at just 1 will. Choosing to use the Guinevere's here as best as possible. They're going to die anyway, so we might as well get the value off of them. Discarding a Chuchulainn, I think, off of the first Guinevere, and then a Leviathan off the second. Gonna go ahead and banish the Percy to deal 200 damage to him. He's gonna go ahead and Seal of Lenneth our Leviathan, tapping him out for the turn and leaving him at 2300. End of the turn, then we're gonna go ahead and double Thunder Aaron, takes him down to 13, but he's completely tapped out, and 1300 is a very difficult position for him to be in. We don't have that Leviathan, it has been removed. We're gonna go ahead and cast the Leviathan that we had in hand. That's why we discarded it. We're gonna pick the modes to get a stranger and generate a 7/1. The idea being that we could potentially get the one that gives all of our Resonator Swiftness. It might have just been better to just burn him for 7. Ultimately, though, we don't really need it because we have Shakti who has Swiftness, the 7/1, and then we have Awakening of the Opening the Red Eyes to burn them both, or to pump them both up so that it's more than enough damage to deal 13. So there you guys have it. The Melgis deck just really taking advantage of that early game kind of chink in the armor and pushing through for damage before Aaron can kind of reestablish. But those were the matches. Again, huge thanks to Aaron for being willing to play the list and showing it off. But until next time, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.